Alexi, welcome. How are you?
Hey Nas, how are you doing? Very good on my side. It's the weekend soon. So
Thanks for coming on. So I'm really excited to be talking with you today. We've got to know each other for a little bit, and I'm really excited to do this podcast with you and jump into your world. So before we do that, let me just give you a little introduction, and then you can come in and bounce some ideas back, and I'll ask you to expand on that. So for those of people who don't know who Alexis Gresoviac is. Alexis is a seasoned gaming industry leader, COO on demand, and a gaming consultant with over 25 years experience. From launching Gameloft Japan and leading Blizzard Entertainment Korea to consulting for C-suite teams, Alexis is a multi-entrepreneur actively involved in several businesses across diverse industries. Now, as the founder of Ace Consulting, he helps businesses and game studios as an acting COO to find clients, create relevant partnerships, and raise funds. Welcome. Lovely to have you here.
thank you, Nas. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I'm super pleased to take this time to discuss with you about my learnings and everything that I can do to support other people or to give them some perspective about their own business or their own career. That's the
That's
objective.
perfect. Thank you. I'm very, very grateful that you're here. So for people who, I always start by saying, well, that's a lot of words, and what does all that really mean? And what does that mean for you when you think back of all the work that you've done in your career, and you've managed as a CEO, you've done so many different roles. If you could boil down all of your intro, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do, how you help people? Just really curious to understand from your perspective.
Yes, so myself, I have been acting as a managing director in many companies for 20 years. And I have a pretty large international background because I'm French, but I'm living in Berlin, in Germany. And before I was in Japan, and before in Korea, before in Japan. So I moved quite a lot. And basically, I got all this experience that I gathered from the different companies and from the different countries. And this experience, I thought that, especially when I started beginning of 2024, let's try to bring these learnings and my experience and my skills to other people and to act in a way as a kind of mentor, as someone who can really support their management team. It's very true for the high growth scaling company, but also there are many, and we know about it in the gaming industry, there are many companies who are really struggling right now. They are struggling because they don't have any funds. They are struggling because they don't know exactly how to manage, how to allocate the budget, what should be the next step. They are a little bit lost because they are just with themselves. And as a founder, as a CEO, people do not know what should be the best action. And most of the time, there is no one best action. There is multiple options, and they just need to be and to see clearer what would be the most relevant for them, and then to act strategically. So myself, I'm trying to bring that perspective to the startups, but also to bigger companies, and to act either as a fractional CEO if it is very short, like there is a problem and I bring the solution, or as a CEO on demand if it is a longer term and a longer mission, I would say.
Fantastic. Amazing. Sounds like you've definitely got a wealth of experience. And actually, when I was getting prepared for this podcast, one thing that I found quite interesting, excuse me, is that I want to ask if it's true because we've known each other for a while, but was it true that you first wanted to be a vet? Is that true? Did I
Yes,
read that? Yeah.
yes, yes. No, that's very true. Yes, I was. It's a little bit strange story, but in France, when you want to become a vet, you need to be a genius in mathematics. Really, in
Okay.
mathematics, it's one of the most difficult. It's even more difficult than the engineer school in France because there are
Really?
many people who want to be. So they use that as a kind of an excuse for selection of people. So I love animals. And I thought
Mm.
that, oh, I would be a great vet to take care of the animals. Unfortunately, I was not good enough in mathematics to be able to be a surgeon of the animals. So I just rerouted, and I was thinking, okay, except animals, what is the second thing that I love the most? And
Mm.
at that time, and it's still, it was Japan. And I say, okay,
Right.
now I want to go to Japan. So how do I go to Japan? What is the best way? And okay, I cannot really be an engineer because I just said before I was not good enough in mathematics. And I said, yeah, but I love business. So I said, okay, I will study economics. And from that, I will find a job in Japan. And this is exactly what happened.
Wow. I did not know. That's cool. That's cool. What? So
So
you,
there is one already, there is a
yeah.
kind of a learning is that many times, the startups or the people or the entrepreneurs, they are considering I'm failing. So basically that I'm not good or it just a fail in my life. But most of the time, it's just bringing you to another direction. It's one fail doesn't mean that you are not a good person or you are not skilled enough or something like that. Maybe that was just not your path, that's just not your way. Maybe that's it. And you just need to accept, and it brings you to something better afterwards.
Do you still have, like you said, you love animals? Do you have animals? Do you own pets? Is that something that you?
Yes, I have a fantastic cat right now. Unfortunately, she's a little bit old, and she's right now she's sick recently, so we were going to the vet. That's part of life. But yeah, if I could define my life, I would say, oh, I want to have a big house with a lot of different animals. That would be a dream, like any
Like Ace
kind of animal.
Ventura, like Ace Ventura, something like
Yeah,
this.
exactly, exactly. Because all of them, they are like, in a way, they are like people. They have
Mm,
different personalities. So dogs and cats, there is always the confrontation. It's like, are you more a dog type or a cat type? Why cannot you be both? Same as
yeah,
a
yeah,
business,
yeah,
there is a tendency that people are putting you into a box. You don't have to accept that. I never accepted that, and for a very long time, I eventually decided to move back to Europe, but people were always like, Alexi is Japan mobile. And I didn't want to have only this kind of stamp, on my forehand.
mm,
And I wanted to be something else, just as an entrepreneur, a businessman. I think it's far more interesting. So that's the same. You don't need to be defined by only one thing. You can be multiple things. You can be an entrepreneur, you can be someone who is very creative, you can paint or you can play music, you can make so many things in life. What does it has to be only one thing?
yeah.
So
I
I'm
love,
trying to break a little bit this kind of boundaries also for people when I'm doing some executive coaching for them.
I love that. I think it's something that you have told me a few times after we've spoke offline about being put into this kind of box around who you are or what you do. And I think it's so normal, it's so natural for us humans to want to do that, right? We want for things to be simple. We want to be like, who is Alexis? He's the game guy or he's this, but you wanted to be a vet. You're so much more than the things that you say you are, and so much more than the things that you put yourself in a box of. You can really, I think that's probably something that I'm hearing you say is that don't limit yourself to your one particular thing, that you can
Hmm.
be multiple. So for like people who, like younger people, so like when you were 20 years old, or if you were talking to someone who was 20, what kind of advice is that something that you would say is relevant for young people specifically, or younger people that they get in this mindset they want to be a certain thing and they only want to be that thing and they kind of forget about the other potential skills or the other things that they have available to them? Is that something that you, based on your experience?
Luckily for me, when I was young, after this vet story, and I decided to do business in Japan, I was 100% sure what I wanted to do. And usually we are saying to people, you need to have a vision board of what you want to be, how you want to eventually be defined, or what would be a dream life for you. And for me, I had this vision board. I didn't have it, I would say, physically or digitally, but I had in my mind, it was a very clear picture,
Mm.
extremely clear picture. And everything was flowing naturally because I knew exactly what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And I think that's very important to be able for yourself, not the other people should define you, but you need to be able to define what should be your life. So already you can start where you want to live. How do you want to live? What kind of work would be acceptable for you? And then after, when you are young, you start with something, and through the path you will have always crossroads, especially when you are young. It's more difficult when you are getting older, but when you are young, you have constant crossroads. And you can choose to go, I will go left, I will go right. And you will see sometime that some paths are just expanding in a way. This is what happened to me when I became managing director for Gameloft. Originally, I was acting as a country manager for a subsidiary of France Telecom Group in the gaming section. And for them, I was acting as a country manager, but most of my role was I was acting as a licensing manager. I was doing licensing and out. So I was doing a lot. So a lot of negotiation and sales, prospect, etc. And then, because I knew very well about the carrier business, I knew very well about games, I was headhunted by Gameloft. They wanted to do business in Japan, but they didn't know exactly which shape. And at the beginning, we were just considering about doing licensing. But because there was no real big deal on the table and we were very confident about our product, we said, okay, we will do a company and we will do by ourselves. And because there was this confidence. So I started as a business development guy, but as soon as you create a company, you need to have a representative. So de facto, you are becoming a managing director and you are just with yourself. Then you recruit one person, 5%, 20, 50, 100. And basically, this is how you learn the job of managing director. But it was coming from the business development. It was more like a consequence, the result, but the cause was different. It was like, let's try to do business in Japan for Gameloft, and that was exciting for me. It was the beginning also of mobile industry. So it was super exciting and it was challenging. And usually this is what I like. I like new project, new product, and challenging the market. And here you can go where you are going, and then after the role is growing into you, where I was doing more and more management.
So were you hired? I'm really curious. Were you hired as a business development, or you were hired as the MD and then grew in? So you were hired as the business development and grew into the MD role, or you were hired as the MD but with only business development experience at the time? I'm curious because it's an interesting distinction.
Yeah, no, I was recruited as a business development guy because there was no company. So basically, I
Right.
couldn't be a managing director, and
Right.
there was no office, there was nothing.
Mm.
I even started with my own computer. There was nothing. And after, for a while, for the time of the creation of the company, I was working in the sister company, Ubisoft, and I was
Yeah.
working with them in Japan. I was not working on their product and working on their project, but I was with them as it was a sister company. And on my side, I was establishing the company because it's kind of complicated in Japan to create a company at the start. After it's becoming easier. But once it was established, I basically officially became managing director and I moved and I took my own office to have a clear distinction and separation with Ubisoft and to be able to manage our own business.
Right. So, I mean, I can imagine going in with the business development mindset. You didn't see yourself as just that, right? I imagine based on what you've told me about, you have this vision from early. You had this vision of what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go. So, how did you make that switch? I'm guessing you somewhere in there you had this mindset of like, I'm going to lead this company and set up this company and become the head figure and build this because what you did was you built a huge team. So what things were you focused? I know it's a little bit tough, but if you can remember, like what things were you focused on doing? Like in terms of, because for some people they might hear that like, wow, how the hell did you go and build a team from the ground up? What sort of mindset shifts or areas were you focusing on, or how did you kind of come into that? That's a huge challenge. How did you kind of come into that?
Yeah, so it was not really a change of mindset because it
Okay.
was always the same. And even when I was a managing director, I was I was continuing to do some business development. I was continuing to do some licensing out. For example, I licensed out the Asphalt series on console to Konami, and I was doing some business with the console maker like Nintendo or PlayStation. So there is no real change of mindset. And also, I was not so much considering, oh, I will be this big boss or something like that. I was just focusing myself. I just wanted to do business in Japan. That was good enough for me, and that was exciting enough. So every day is a new day, and every day you take a small step to move forward the business. And for us, basically, nothing was existing. So the first thing first, we needed to be, I would say, whitelisted, to be approved by the carrier, the Japanese carrier. And once we got the first approval, we started to develop some games. But at that time, there was no iPhone, so Japan was completely closed. You couldn't use the device overseas. So we need to have some prototype device, extremely difficult to get. And it was absolutely not like it is today. So you need to get the prototype from, for example, the carriers, or to get, I would say, the unlock mode for the development on this phone. And then you need to be able to develop some games on it. The problem is that you cannot do overseas because we needed to have the network. So because of that, we had to start having more production people. And it started like that. First, to release the first game. And I started with one guy to help me. And then after, we had excellent result on the market. That was very new because all the games were, I would say, all the games were Japanese, and we were arriving like with a kind of a bang with very high quality contents, very different from the others. The first game I released was a Splinter Cell game, Splinter Cell series, and it was a big one, and it was very successful. And from that, we say, wow, our games are doing great in Japan. So now let's create some games also in Japan and to create more and more. And this is how we expanded the team progressively. Most of the time when you do business, or when you develop a business, it's always based on opportunity and decision making of pivoting to something that you were not planning at first. In that case, we wanted to do licensing, but because the offer on the table were not good enough, we pivoted to create our own structure. And then after, with our own structure, the point was to release the game that we are developed internationally in Gameloft. And this is what we were doing. So it was a kind of a publishing activity, but it was doing so well. We said, okay, let's move faster and create our own studio in Japan. And you see, it was a kind also, we didn't remove what was existing before. I was still continuing to do business development, negotiating with carrier and with other game companies, but we just added the publishing, and then we added our own production. So again, one is not preventing the other, and the pivoting is based on the opportunity, and you just discover something where you can maybe rebound. So always to be very open, not narrow-minded, and basically accept that you can change a little bit what was planned originally. There is nothing wrong about that. On contrary, if you stick to just one mindset, that can probably kill you, because whatever the market will eventually change. So you need to constantly adapt and be flexible.
Back to being stuck in the box, right? If you're too stuck in the box, too stubborn, like you want this, if you went out there to launch or create a game, but then you didn't realize there was an opportunity for this new market, this new opportunity, you would be stuck in this way. I think that flexibility is very paramount when it comes to, from your experience, when it comes to creating new products or looking for new opportunities. So what would you say in all of that, from where you led, and whether that's before or after Japan, or before or during Japan when you were there? But that was a huge mark. That was something that you had in your mind you wanted to do. Like you were like, I'm going there. I don't care what level it is. I just want to get there and be in that. You obviously have this affinity to Japan. So what would you say was the biggest challenge during that time, or after you left Japan, you came back to Germany after that? What's been one of your biggest challenges that you faced, either in Gameloft or at huge games?
Yeah,
Or
for me, I think the biggest challenge, and it's still a challenge, and I think it will always be a challenge for most of people and most of the managers. I was making when I moved to Korea, it was a big move, but internationally, I'm used to it. So I'm very open to other culture, other languages, other type of living. So there is no big problem for me. But I was also changing the way that the business is made or the interaction within a company because I was moving from Gameloft, a French-based company, and before it was France Telecom, French-based company, to work for a US-based company. And here the organization were completely different. So, I did Blizzard, and then after I did Bethesda. And I think that what was the most challenging is as soon as I entered there, it was much more matrix type organization. In a sense, when I was in Gameloft, it was mainly about strategy operation. It's very simple. You are focused on the work that you have to do to deliver the revenue. And when I was moving to larger companies like a Blizzard and a Bethesda, in a matrix type organization, that's completely different because there is already it's more than Blizzard was more than $2 billion. So in that sense, the product, in a way, run by themselves. They already exist for
yeah,
more than 20 years, so they will not vanish and disappear. So this is much more important to be influential in the company, and it's much more about internal politics. And this is something that is very complicated because myself, I'm extremely operational person. And here you know that well, basically, it's not so much about what you are doing, but how you are doing it. It's also, are you sponsored internally by this person or this person? It's much more about the relationship, but it will never be openly said. And it was also a change of culture for me because
mm,
I was not working for a US-based company before. So very, very big change. And I think that was the thing that was the most challenging for me because I'm extremely focused on my work. And of course, I was visiting as much as I could, I will say, the entities. But if you do not have enough time to understand the complexity of the relationship between the different studios, the different people,
mm,
because that's the reality.
yeah,
Different people with different studio, you have a tendency to believe that everyone is on the same vision, the same way of thinking, because you are in Blizzard, because you are in Bethesda, but not at all. The studios, they are very different with different personalities, and you need to be able to work with all these people who have already their own personal agenda of what they want to push. So it's
mm,
extremely complicated, and I think this is something, if I had to look as giving me advice, like when I was young, something I would say is that to learn and to invest the time to better understand how to better manage the internal politics inside the company, especially in this type of organization that we were not having in Gameloft or in France Telecom, which is the matrix type organization. That's
yeah.
something that was pretty new at that time, but that's something that is becoming more and more relevant because the US way of type of organization is kind of spreading. And this is kind of important because this is not about control and operation. This is about influence within the company.
I got a lot of when I used to work for Coca-Cola, as you know, and it was I really understand perfectly what you're saying because I mean there was even sayings to the point where it's not about necessarily the work that you're doing, it's about how you're perceived about the work that you're doing, which for me was like, what? That doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. Like for me, I was just like this hard working, when I was younger, I was this hard working kid who just wanted to like just show his way through his work. And it didn't matter whether the job took 4 hours or 12 hours, I was going to get it done. But then as you start to get higher in a company, particularly the higher you go, the more it becomes about how you are perceived and this kind of, like you said, the way you framed it, this internal politics. And it became a bit of a game almost. And you had to manage you have to manage people's egos, and you have to know, what this person is. It becomes very much about communication skills and understanding who this person you're talking to. Can you say this thing to this person? If you say it, will that then go to someone else? And obviously the metric side, being in a sales, being from a sales background, I really understand what you're saying. Like it's always about chasing last year. I never understood why we never looked at things on like a 2 or 3 year basis versus just like how did we perform versus this time last year versus last year. I'm like, what? Why don't we look at like longer? It's like no, because they have shareholders, right? They have like
Mhm.
huge shareholders, and they care about how you're performing in the now. They don't, and that's probably a big shift I would imagine in Japan. It's like they look at long term, right?
Yes,
They don't
absolutely.
look at just like next year or like how did we do last year. They look at how are we doing the next 25 years. Like where they're planting a tree to grow for the long term. So that challenge in there for people in that corporate, I guess that's more of a corporate environment. What I'm hearing
Mm.
you say, right? When you're in a corporate environment or a larger business is much more established at their kind of maturity, you begin to have to become more aware of how you're acting and how you're being perceived in the company versus actually what you're doing in the company.
Absolutely. And I think this is where most of us, because this is an always ongoing job, I think this is where most of us we are failing because we are not prepared. We do not have the experience,
Mm,
and we just arrive to a company and we say, okay, what are the objectives? What are the goals? What is the mission statement? What are we supposed to achieve this year or next year? And we just want to work diligently. And we say that, yes, I will be judged on my result. But then bigger is becoming the company and more it's becoming complicated because bigger is the company. That means that more or less, you will have less impact unless you are the top manager, the CEO of the company or something like that. Your impact would be less than in a smaller company. So that means that at the end, it's becoming much more a political game. How, if you want to impact the company, you need to move up enough to gain back your impact. But to do that, you have to kind of bind the rules and bind what you are supposed to do to take care much more about the relationship with the people internally than about the job itself. And this is where we are kind of missing it. And that's why myself with ACE Consulting, I think this is where I can bring something because as a CEO on demand, I can act as a mentor and I can say for many people who are kind of blocked in a situation, I'll say, oh, we don't know how to extract from this problem. I
mm,
have the experience. I have lived, and basically I was experiencing it and I was working quite a lot and I know exactly the foundation of this matrix type organization. And I understand also what it's requiring from, I would say, executives or I would say middle upper management people.
mm,
It's kind of extremely complicated to move within, and it's much more about relationships. So again, having as an advice for young people, I would suggest that they get interest of how to create relationship, how to nurture a relationship with other people within a company. When you ask people, most of the time, people will tell you, "I don't like politics in companies.
mm,
I don't like
yeah.
politics." And I think that's perfectly fine. And I don't like politics either. I don't consider that I'm good enough in that game because I'm much more operational. But in a way, we need to reverse that sense and that way of thinking to say, okay, these are the rules of the games. I need to understand the rules of the game. And to do that, we need basically to read a lot, to have some mentors. I would recommend managers, middle managers, upper managers, and executive to always work with mentors because they can benefit from that and to get an external point of view and to think about their own situation because you cannot detach yourself from what you are living. That's the point of coaching or to have someone outside that can mentor you. It's extremely difficult. And everyone should do this and to say, okay, right now I know how to manage a company, but the next step is to understand how to manage myself to be able to move my career up within a company. Again, bigger is the company, more obvious it's becoming. But myself, I was moving from Gameloft that was about 300 million euro to Blizzard that was basically 3 or 2.5 billion. It's completely different. You just multiply the company size and revenue by 8 with less people than Gameloft. The power play is there is no comparison in terms of budget that you are managing, in terms of operation, marketing, everything is completely different. The size of the product, the PR, the communication, and yeah, you know how to operate, but you are working with other people who know how to operate, but you need to understand how can I be better myself to be able to move up so I will have more impact eventually to this company and I can bring more to this company.
Do you think younger people, I mean, before I get into that question, I agree because I've done a lot of access to a lot of mentors. So I know the power of, having people to converse with and then get feedback on and see, the big companies, some well-run companies, and Coca-Cola was a very well-run company that had very good systems to help you with coaching, and you had mentors. So they did know how to look after their people. But I'm wondering if you think that, and this may be an odd question, but do you feel like the younger, I mean, me and you are a little bit older than the younger generation, but do you feel like the younger people are still wanting to play that game? Or do you feel like this is where kind of smaller studios or smaller companies have an advantage to attract? Because not everyone wants to be in this big metric kind of machine. Do you think there's an opportunity, or has been for a long time probably, for kind of less smaller companies or companies which have more of a flat structure to attract better talent, or to attract talent based on you don't have to play this kind of, I mean, all companies have this thing, but do you think there's an opportunity, or young people even want to play this game anymore because this corporate kind of, I mean, I had bad experiences in the past, but what's your thoughts? I'm just curious we got here.
I've seen, I mean, in 25 years experience, I've seen the big changes. And I think that young people are less and less interested. And the new generation, they believe, I think they understand the rules of the game, but not about the company, but about life. I think that young people are, in a way, are smarter than older people because we were raised by our parents. But from the boomer generation is you need to find a job and you need to work from 9 to 5 or something like that, the typical one. Now for the younger generation, they can see that in a way the world is broken, so they have to refuse these rules that were working until now. And that's why there are so many young people who want to become entrepreneur, because they also understood that if you want to really succeed in life, so and to become rich and to have control, it's better to have your own company. If you have your own company, you have a chance to become eventually rich, or at least to have a team and to do a project that you love. I think there are less and less in politics. You will have always people who are in politics, and you will find them in these big companies. But I think that this is also true that there is a shift. I think it arrived probably around between probably I would say 2015. I was seeing already some kind of changes, and I think the development of internet in general, with all the tools, with all the SaaS tools that we are using right now, and it just accelerated, and now we have AI and everything. It completely changed everything. Now, one person alone can create a massive company and can have a massive impact in the world, where before you needed to have 10,000 people. So things have completely changed. People can create a game by themselves, publish it on an iPhone and be successful and make millions. So everything is possible that way. There is so many people like you are doing, creating podcasts, creating contents. And I think the big shift is that before the mindset, the mentality was, okay, tell us what to do and we will do it well. And now is for people, they say, I want to create things. I don't want to be just a consumer. I want to be a creator. And the value is in the creation. And in a way is that when you are creating something, you realize that this is in the creation that there is happiness. Is when you create something. You can create a company, you can create a business, you can create a product, you can create a strategic plan, you can create relationship. It's in the creation process that you get happiness. And that's interesting that today's world in IT and all the tech startup, the power of them is to bring people to say, let's create and let's change the world together. Let's do something like that, which was not really the case before. I think that there is far less people dreaming about joining McKinsey or joining Coca-Cola than it was like 20 years or 40 years ago, for sure.
Wow, I really love what you said. Wow, what you said, the power. I think you said again, you said the happiness is in the creation,
Yes, it's in
right?
the creation process, exactly like
Mm,
when you see someone drawing, when you are walking, when you are visiting some cities, you have always some people painting or drawing. And if you realize something, they always look very calm people. And I
mm,
think they are in this sense of flow, that they are very good in where they are and they enjoy what they are doing. And you have everyone that is moving around. You have, you can be in Rome, in Venice, in Paris, and you have thousands and thousands of people moving around. They just don't care. They continue what they are doing, and they are
mm,
super, in a way, they are super peaceful. So I think that when you are doing what you are supposed to do and what you enjoy, you are reaching this kind of state of mind, this kind of flow that you
mm,
are feel that you are in the exact right place. And when you find your right place, this is where I think that the success will come.
mm. Wow, I love that. How does someone align that? How do you get, because for someone who's listening, is like, yeah, like for me, I'm even here, I'm like, wow, that sounds incredible. And I do get those moments, but I'm wondering, how do you align that during your day, or how do you think about getting into that process? What grounds you, or what takes you into that flow? You.
There is the first thing is what you are already doing, or what is
Mm,
your business, or what is your work. And then after is, I think, the big shift. Myself, I learned, I had a kind of epiphany about that. Is that I have a friend who is a YouTuber, and I just realized that is, I know few YouTubers, very big influencers, and what I realized is that the people who watch the less YouTube are YouTubers because they don't consume, because they
yeah,
create. And I
yeah,
think that I said, wow, so basically we need to change this state of mind of just consuming and just be passive to be much more active. It's exactly like what you are doing right now, is that you can listen podcast, nothing wrong about that, but you can also create podcasts. It's even better. So
yeah,
there is always something more. Of course, it depends on your time, on your availabilities, and the time that you have in a day. But you can do during your weekend, or you can do at night. You can do your own project. And you have so many people, for example, developers. They work for companies, but at night they are developing their own project, their own
yeah,
game, their own application. You have some people creating their own podcast, their own YouTube channel outside of their job. So this is also something. And you have more and more people who are doing these kind of things. So again, creating is a very good way. When I was working in Huge, we had something that was really great. We were developing important games for the company, but at the same time, the way that the company was structured and organized is to have always a kind of R&D center, so you can prototype. You can prototype. In a way, your life should be a little bit like a company. If you
mm,
consider yourself, you run yourself as a kind of business. You
mm,
need to have, you need to eat healthy, to sleep well, etc., etc. You need to run, so you are never. You need to have always some money because you cannot run out of cash. Exactly same as a company. It's a cash management. It's exactly the same. But then after about the R&D center, then basically it's prototyping and playing with some ideas. You can try new things. You can try new type of businesses. You meet someone, a guy, and you have an acquaintance, and you discuss about something in a bar, or it's at a restaurant, and you say, hey, let's do that. Then nothing is preventing you to do that during the weekend, during the evenings, to create a company and to have a side gig, a side business. It's not cutting the first one. Again, it's people always consider, if I do this, I cannot do that. No, you can do
yeah,
both. until one is taking over the other one. So that's an opportunity. And this is also pivoting. This is being flexible. It's coming back to everything that we have discussed until now.
Amazing. I would love that. I've noticed with myself, content consumption, I was like, I want to create more stuff. So I was thinking, okay, all that time I'm using to consume content, stuff that I like, right? I don't know
Mm.
how much it is. Yeah, I do track it. But I could just use any time I'm going to consume, I can then take that consumer energy and kind of, I don't know, recycle it potentially and start researching and learning. And I find the more I can kind of get into that mindset of trying to create more stuff than consuming stuff, because
Mm.
as great as it is and as entertain, it has entertainment value. I definitely find like doing this podcast with you, for example, versus listening to a podcast, I grow like 5 times, 10 times more. I develop way. I'm more active in this experience. I can't be thinking about, who's texting me or what I'm going to eat. I
Mm.
can't be thinking about. I have to be with you to be good. So it creates more energy to focus and create, and more flow. Is in fact actually, I love
And
that.
you have achieved something. You know that you have achieved, you can say, wow, I did something that I was not doing before.
Mm,
So your skills, your competence and is expanding, and you can discover something new in yourself. As you know, myself, when I started ACE, I was developing my own website by
mm,
myself. And I was not really expecting that because I never did before, but I was so much enjoying it. I was so much enjoying it, and it's something that I never done before. I could have not discovered that this part of a creation process for me before doing it. So you need also to give yourself the luxury to try new things, even if you are not comfortable, to fail at doing new things, but also to constantly try new things.
mm,
It can be, you can write your post, you can maybe do some kind of montage to put some advertisement on Instagram or to have a channel on whatever on TikTok, etc., etc. You can create more things, and you will see what sticks and what you are good at, what you enjoy the most, and you will understand just by doing by yourself. Most of the time is when you are super focused in something, this is what you like. This
mm,
is what, in a way, what you are meant to. You cannot do everything. There is a sense of prioritization, but think life as a business with a small R&D center. Something
I love
like
that.
that is, well, what about this? The same when you are traveling, you should always consider, okay, maybe I should travel to maybe, I don't know, a country or a city where eventually I will be interested in living. So you are giving yourself you have a chance not to be the tourist, but you are more active and to say, what would it be to live in this city? And to check
Mm,
a little bit about real estate. What about the business? What about the network, the communication, etc., etc. So you are just not someone that is here, let's go to point A and to point B and just be a tourist and just consuming, but just like you see your life as in a more creative way. And
mm.
that's always kind of exciting to look with different perspective like that.
I love it. I love that. Your analogies are amazing about using your life as an R&D. Tell me quickly, we'll wrap up. What are you're a reader? Are you an audio book type of guy? Like what do you prefer to read? You prefer to listen? Are you listening to anything at the moment other than obviously this podcast? um, and going to listen to it after. Do you have any books that you recommend to people, or because we talked a lot? I didn't know where this was going. We talked a lot about creativity. I wasn't not expecting that at all. But is there any books that you recommend to people or or businesses
Yeah.
that you work with? I'm curious to find out.
Because I was, you will be very surprised, you will see. Because I was in Japan, I was doing a lot of commuting. There is always a lot of commuting in Japan. And I was reading a ton of books. So I was reading one book a week. And
Wow.
so I was reading more than 50 a year. And I was working in Japan for 20 years. So you can imagine how many books. I've read so many books of fantasy, like
Mm,
Royal Assassin and Game of Thrones and etc. etc. I had all the fantasy phase, and And I'm always reading a lot of books about self-development and about entrepreneur, but also about managing companies, these kind of books. It's always interesting to me. Also books about money management, because I think this is a topic where we can improve our life, not only it's not by receiving money, but better managing what we have already to multiply it. That's something interesting. But I have I have a big passion for comics. And there is one, and you will be surprised. It's a comic made by a genius that is called Don Rosa, and this is the life and adventures of Scrooge McDuck. That will
Okay.
be my recommendation. And in fact, I'm buying for my children, and we all have triple copies at home. Even I have more. I have I think 5 or 6 times this story. And this is one of the most extraordinary story, easily one of the top 5 comics ever created. And
Wow.
why it's interesting is because of course it's starting from a duck story, right? Everyone know Scrooge McDuck. But the question it will rise is, how did it become the richest duck in the world, right? How did it happen? And what is the meaning of this big safe that he has with billions and gazillions of dollars and everything? And what is the meanings of all these coins that is swimming inside, and etc., etc.? And the story will explain all that. It's there is 12 chapters, and this is one of the most best well-written story ever. And you will learn through this story, and that's a little bit the story of life and the story of entrepreneurship. That's, unfortunately, by wanting to achieve greatness, there is a lot of sacrifice,
Mm.
lot of sacrifices, and you are learning that behind everything, that when you look at someone, this is the result of this person, you don't know the backstory of the person.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you can say, in that case, I know that you were in Australia, and myself, I was in France. Scrooge McDuck was in Scotland, and he moved to
Mm.
US. And basically, that means that in a way that you are leaving your family, you will
Yeah.
not see them as regularly. It's a change of life. It's a change of way of doing. You arrive to a new country with new way of life, new ways of doing business, new ways of interacting, and you need to learn and to grow progressively. And there will be some fails, and you will have to climb again, and there will be again some fails, and sometimes there will be some hurdles and some setback that will be extremely violent story of life. And this is why this is one of the greatest book ever written, because when I was offering it to my kids, they didn't really understood about it. And I
Mm.
said, older you will become, more it will touch you, until to the
Mm.
point when you will be old enough, you will just cry by reading it, because you will have your own experience that will match the experience of Scrooge McDuck. Of course, this is metaphoric, what
Yes.
is happening inside the book, but this is extremely powerful, and it's becoming powerful years after years. So it's a little bit like the movies of, let's say, Stanley Kubrick. You can watch them when you are 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 50 years old. You will not watch them the same way, because you have your own experience, your own
Yeah.
maturity. That's exactly the same for this book. And this maturity is coming from your life. It will change your perspective about how you are reading this book.
I'm going to put my hand up and say I've never even heard of this character. This is
This is
uh,
extraordinary.
this is a tragedy by your part.
And
But
that
thank you.
is the uncle of Donald. So you should know Donald.
Okay, I should know that. I should know that.
Yeah.
I will have to. I'll put the link in the notes as well.
I will send you the link of, and there is some, it's an extraordinary story. Yeah.
Amazing. Alexi, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your experiences, your stories. I really appreciate coming on, and I really enjoyed talking with you, and just want to say thank you. And it was lovely to learn more about you and what you do. So thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much for inviting me.